I'll take legal action against you, Victor spat, his face inches from mine, freezing the conference room as 27 colleagues stared mid-motion, some gripping pens tighter, others averting their eyes, everyone holding their breath. The quarterly staff meeting had unraveled when I refused to approve the Riverside Plaza designs. You think anyone cares about a few inches of doorway width? About some pointless, bumpy strips on the floor? He jabbed his finger into my folder. You're costing us millions with these absurd demands. My heart pounded, but I stayed calm. Those strips meant the difference between a blind person navigating safely or getting lost. A few inches determined bathroom access. Victor's eyes narrowed, his bright red tie crooked. Bryn, you're finished. I'm calling my attorney. We'll sue you personally for breach of contract and sabotage. The room seemed to shrink. Two interns exchanged shocked glances. My supervisor studied her coffee cup. Nobody defended me. Please do, I said, collecting my things. Call your attorney. I'd love to explain all the violations you forced me to ignore. His sneer curled. You've signed off on every project. Your liability. What he didn't see was I remembered everything, and the small recording device in my blazer pocket capturing months of private meetings. Meeting adjourned, he barked, phone in hand. I left, head high, feeling 27 pairs of eyes burning into my back, watching him pace, gesturing wildly, face shifting from rage to confusion to drained of color. 23 minutes later, my phone buzzed. You might want to see this, with a recording that would change everything. Until 3 months ago, I was Ben Harlow, Senior Accessibility Compliance Specialist at a major urban development firm, reviewing plans for ADA compliance, ramps, doorway widths, tactile pathways, bathrooms. Not glamorous, but vital work. I grew up with my grandmother after my parents died, and when she had a stroke at 72, I watched her world shrink overnight. Suddenly, 3 steps were mountains. A door 2 inches too narrow barred entry. That's why I became an accessibility specialist. Architecture isn't just aesthetics, it's inclusion. At first, the job felt meaningful, catching violations, teaching architects universal design, making the world navigable for people like my grandmother. Then Victor arrived. 6 weeks later, Pinewood Medical Center plans hit my desk with major violations. Insufficient turning radii, high call buttons, non-transferable exam tables. These need revisions, I told him. He leaned back. The clients approved the budget. Make it work. It doesn't meet code. I can't sign off. Bryn, this is $30 million. The client will walk. Be flexible. There's no interpretation of a 60-inch turning radius. It either is or isn't. His friendly tone vanished. You're new. Sometimes compliance is negotiable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I called my mentor. Victor wanted me to break the law. The next morning, I revised plans, detailing exact requirements, sent them to the architect, copying Victor. 2 hours later, who authorized this? I'm doing my job. These are legal requirements. His whisper. 20 people line up for your job who know how it works. Don't make me replace you. I held firm. I won't approve non-compliant designs. Weeks of silent battles followed. I rejected plans. Mysterious revised versions with my forged signature appeared. I flagged violations, all while preparing for the moment I could expose the truth. Victor dismissed them as minor issues, and the Pinewood project moved forward with half my recommendations ignored. Then came the email that made my blood run cold. A mother whose son used a wheelchair explained that at the newly opened Pinewood Medical Center, he couldn't use the bathroom independently. The turning radius was too small, exactly as I had warned. I thought places like this were supposed to be accessible, she wrote. My son was humiliated. I printed her email and walked straight into Victor's office, closing the door behind me. This is why compliance matters, I said, placing the letter on his desk. He barely glanced at it. One complaint from one person, Cost of doing business. That one person is exactly who these laws are designed to protect. Victor leaned back. You know your problem, Bryn? You treat these regulations like sacred texts. They're guidelines open to interpretation. They're civil rights laws, I countered. Would you call racial discrimination laws guidelines? His face hardened. Don't be dramatic. We're talking a few inches here and there. A few inches that decide whether someone can use a bathroom. He stood abruptly. I'm done with this conversation. The Riverside Plaza plans need your sign-off by tomorrow. Make it happen. Those plans had even worse violations than Pinewood, and I realized this pattern would continue project after project unless something changed. That night, I made a decision that led to the conference room confrontation, Victor's legal threats, and the text on my phone waiting to be opened. I clicked the attachment, holding my breath. Victor's voice came first, tight with controlled rage. She's completely out of line. Patrick, shut her down. Breach of contract, professional sabotage. Make an example of her. A pause. Then a deeper voice responded. Which compliance regulations is she insisting on? All of them. Doorway widths, ramp gradients, bathroom dimensions. She's treating the ADA like scripture. Another pause. And you want her to ignore these? I want her to be reasonable. These aren't hospital rooms. They're retail spaces and offices. Nobody's life depends on an extra 2 inches of doorway. Silence stretched uncomfortably long. Then Patrick spoke, his voice different, icy. Victor, my daughter Lily uses a wheelchair. She's 12. Do you know how many places she can't go because of 2 inches? How many times we've had to leave restaurants? How many school events she's missed? Victor's stammering reply was painful. I didn't realize. No, you didn't, Patrick cut in. And let me be clear, I will not represent you. I'll personally notify the state licensing board about these violations. Patrick, wait, Victor protested. I've advised many difficult clients, but I draw the line at someone knowingly violating accessibility laws, laws that let people like my daughter live with dignity. You can't. I absolutely can, and I will. Good luck finding another attorney willing to defend intentional ADA violations. They're civil rights violations, not just compliance issues. The recording ended. I sat frozen in my car, heart pounding, staring at the office where, on the 14th floor, Victor was likely enduring the worst day of his professional life. My phone buzzed again from the unknown number. He's in full panic mode. Board members have been called in. Thought you should know. I tried to process it all. My mysterious ally had to be someone inside, someone who witnessed the confrontation and decided to help. But who? Driving home, adrenaline coursing, my apartment felt strange. I wandered from room to room, unable to settle. Had I just ended my career, or finally done what I should have months ago? At 7:38 p.m., my phone rang. Meera Chaudhry, the firm's HR director. Bryn, can you come in tomorrow at 9? The executive board wants to meet with you. Bring any documentation regarding the accessibility issues you've raised. My stomach dropped. That night, I gathered evidence, emails, project notes, revised plans showing before and after Victor's adjustments. Around 3 a.m., I stared at my grandmother's photograph on the nightstand. Was this worth it, Gran? I whispered to her smiling face. She always told me to stand my ground when it mattered, but never warned how terrifying it would feel. Morning arrived too quickly. I dressed carefully, charcoal gray pantsuit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back, professional, unshakable, the exact opposite of how I felt. The executive boardroom was silent as I entered. 7 people sat around the table, including Meera from HR and Elliot Greaves, the company's founder. Victor sat at the far end, his face ashen. Miss Harlow, Elliot began, we understand you have concerns about our compliance practices. For the next hour, I presented my evidence. The Pinewood Medical Center bathroom that didn't meet turning radius requirements. Riverside Plaza with insufficient accessible parking, Oakage Mall with inadequate tactile pathways for the visually impaired, project after project where accessibility had been compromised for cost or aesthetics. I showed them the mother's email about her son unable to use the Pinewood bathroom and letters from advocacy groups questioning our firm's commitment to accessibility. This isn't just about following rules, I concluded. It's about whether we create spaces that welcome everyone or exclude the most vulnerable. The board exchanged glances. Victor stared at the table, jaw clenched. Elliot cleared his throat. Victor, would you care to respond? Victor's head snapped up. These are complex projects with hundreds of requirements. Minor oversights happen. Bryn is exaggerating. Minor oversights? I echoed. Is that what you call it when you told me, and I quote, nobody's going to notice if the braille signage isn't perfect? I never said that. I pulled out my phone. Would you like me to play the recording? The room went completely still. Victor's face drained of color. You recorded our conversations? He whispered. After you started altering my signed documents? Yes, I did. Mira leaned forward. You altered signed compliance documents? Victor's eyes darted around, searching for an ally, finding none. We had deadlines to meet, budgets to maintain. She was being obstinate. She was doing her job, Elliot said quietly. The job we hired her to do. What followed was the most uncomfortable 30 minutes of my professional life. The board asked pointed questions about specific projects, violations, and Victor's instructions to me. With each answer, he seemed to shrink further in his chair. Finally, Elliot turned to me. Miss Harlow, we owe you an apology. This company was founded on principles of integrity and excellence. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. I nodded, unsure what to say. We'd like you to stay, he continued. In fact, we want to create a new position, Director of Accessibility and Compliance, reporting directly to me. Would that interest you? The offer stunned me. Yes, it would. Excellent. Mira will work out the details. He turned to Victor. As for you, we'll continue this conversation privately. As the meeting dispersed, Victor caught up to me in the hallway, a mix of fury and panic on his face. You planned this. You set me up, he hissed. I met his gaze steadily. No, Victor. You set yourself up the moment you decided some people's access to the world was negotiable. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. This isn't over. You think you've won? I built relationships with every major client this firm has. They'll follow me. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe they'll prefer a firm that doesn't expose them to lawsuits and bad publicity. His eyes narrowed. You have no idea who you're dealing with. As he stormed away, I realized he was right. I didn't know what Victor was capable of when cornered. Despite the apparent victory, a cold weight settled in my stomach. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Little did I know, Victor's threat wasn't empty. Within days, I would see exactly how far he would go and how much I'd have to sacrifice to stop him. The first warning came from an unexpected source. Zoe, a junior designer who'd always been friendly but not close, slipped a note onto my desk 2 days later. He's meeting with Tanner Holdings tonight. Be careful. Tanner Holdings, our largest client, responsible for nearly 40% of the firm's revenue. If Victor convinced them to follow him, my victory would be short-lived, and dozens of colleagues would lose their jobs. I stared at the note, heart racing. The war I thought I'd won had only begun. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by project files. My promotion gave me access to records I'd never seen, including complete client histories and financial arrangements Victor had negotiated. What I found made my stomach turn. The Tanner Holdings contracts contained clauses allowing them to bypass standard compliance for aesthetics, corporate speak for ignoring accessibility laws whenever they interfered with design vision. I was still processing this discovery when my doorbell rang. On my porch stood Drew, a project architect who had always quietly supported me. "Can I come in?" he asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Once inside, Drew didn't waste time. "Victor called an emergency meeting with Tanner Holdings tonight. He's telling them you're on a crusade that will add millions to their development costs." "How do you know this?" I asked. Drew hesitated. "I was invited, as were half the senior architects. He's building a coalition, Bryn, promising a new firm that's more pragmatic about regulations." "You mean illegal?" I corrected. "Call it what you want. But 5 architects are ready to follow him. If Tanner goes too, the firm could collapse." I sank into a chair. "Why are you telling me this?" Drew's expression softened. "My brother has multiple sclerosis. 5 years ago he could walk. Now he's in a wheelchair. I've watched his world shrink building by building." He leaned forward. "Victor doesn't just want to leave. He wants to destroy you first. He's telling everyone you fabricated evidence." After Drew left, I called Elliot at home, something I'd never done before. He listened silently as I explained the situation. "Come to my house," he finally said. An hour later, I sat in Elliot's study with him and 2 board members, the weight on their faces telling me everything. Tanner Holdings represented nearly 40% of annual revenue. "If they leave, we'll have to lay off half the staff by Christmas," one board member said. "So what are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. Elliot rubbed his temples. "Maybe we were hasty. Perhaps a compromise." "A compromise on accessibility laws?" I interrupted. "There is no compromise on civil rights. Bryn, be reasonable. We're talking livelihoods. And I'm talking about lives. Every compromise means someone can't enter a building, use a bathroom, or navigate a public space." Silence fell. I could feel my new position slipping before I'd even started. "What if," I said carefully, "there's another way to handle Tanner?" 3 sets of eyes locked on me. "I need 24 hours, I continued, "and complete access to all Tanner project files." Elliot studied me. "What are you planning?" "Better if you don't know yet, but I promise I won't harm the firm." He hesitated, then nodded. 24 hours. I worked through the night, combing years of Tanner Holdings projects. By morning, I identified 17 buildings with major accessibility violations, all approved under Victor's supervision, all potentially exposing Tanner to millions in litigation. At 7 a.m., I walked into the office of Andrea Luna, the city's top disability rights attorney. By 10 a.m., I had what I needed. That afternoon, I pulled into Tanner Holdings headquarters, the sleek glass building looming ironically, given the accessibility issues I'd flagged 2 years prior and Victor had dismissed. In the lobby, I asked for Preston Tanner. His assistant eyed me skeptically. "Mr. Tanner is extremely busy today. Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him Ben Harlow is here regarding potential ADA litigation." 10 minutes later, I sat across from Preston Tanner himself, the man whose signature had authorized millions in construction with blatant accessibility violations. "Miss Harlow," he began smoothly, "Victor has already explained your zealous approach to compliance." I placed a folder on his desk documenting 17 Tanner properties with significant violations. The second folder contained Andrea Luna's assessment of potential damages should a class action be filed. His face tightened. "Is this a threat?" "No, it's an opportunity." I slid a third folder across the desk. Revised plans for all 17 buildings, retrofitting costs, a compliance timeline, and a pledge from our firm to cover 30% of the costs. Preston blinked. "Why would your firm absorb those costs?" "Because we should never have approved the original plans. We failed in our professional duty." I leaned forward. "Mr. Tanner, Victor is offering to help you continue ignoring these laws. I'm offering to help you comply at reduced cost and without publicity. And if I prefer Victor's approach," I held his gaze, "Andrea Luna has the same documentation I just showed you. She's prepared to file tomorrow." His expression darkened. That's definitely a threat. No, I said. A threat would be pointing out potential tax irregularities and how accessibility shortcuts were accounted for. It was a calculated bluff, but the reaction told me it had hit a nerve. The meeting lasted another hour. By the end, Preston Tanner agreed to stay with our firm, implement the retrofitting plan, and, most importantly, make a public commitment to accessibility in all future projects. I drove back to the office feeling hollow rather than triumphant. I had won, but through tactics that left a bitter taste. Elliot was waiting. Tanner just called me. What did you do? I explained the agreement, watching his expression shift from shock to grudging admiration. That was audacious, he said finally. It was necessary. He was right. Victor's retaliation came swiftly and brutally. The next morning, an email circulated to the entire firm and major clients, claiming I had engaged in extortion and unethical practices, with edited snippets, making it seem I had threatened clients for personal gain. What followed were the most grueling weeks of my professional life. Each day brought new allegations. Victor had been methodical, building his case for months, saving out-of-context statements and manipulating documents. 3 clients requested my removal from projects, 2 board members suggested placing me on leave, and even Drew began avoiding my eyes in the hallway. The worst moment came when Elliot called me into his office, expression grave. The board is concerned, Bryn. These allegations are false, I insisted. Victor may have manipulated recordings, but perception matters in this business. Clients are nervous. My throat tightened. So, you're firing me? No, he sighed. But we need to move you to internal projects only. No client contact until this resolves. It was a demotion in all but name. As I walked back to my office, I passed the conference room where it had all started, where Victor had threatened legal action and unwittingly set his own downfall in motion. Only his downfall hadn't happened. Somehow, despite everything, he was winning. That night, I sat alone, surrounded by evidence that now felt useless. Victor had poisoned the well so thoroughly that the truth hardly mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number that had sent the recording of Victor and his lawyer. Don't give up. Check your email in 10 minutes. At precisely 9 p.m., an email arrived. Subject line: The truth about Victor. The attachment was a video file. Hands shaking, I clicked play. The screen showed Victor in a hotel bar, intoxicated, talking to someone off camera. She thinks she's so righteous with her accessibility crusade, he slurred, gesturing expansively. You know what I tell clients? Build it however you want. If someone complains, it's cheaper to settle one lawsuit than redesign the whole building. The off-camera voice asked something I couldn't hear. Victor laughed. Ethics in this business? Look, 90% of people don't need ramps or special bathrooms. Why spend millions accommodating the other 10%? He grew more animated, detailing his systematic approach to circumvent accessibility laws, admitting falsifying compliance documents, and bragging about kickbacks for saving clients money. It was a complete, damning confession. As the video ended, a final text appeared. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Board meeting. This goes to every board member, client, and regulatory agency unless you stop it. I stared at my phone, heart pounding. The mysterious ally was offering complete victory. Victor would be ruined professionally, possibly criminally. All I had to do was show up. If you're feeling conflicted like I was, you're not alone. What would you do with this power over someone who tried to destroy you? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Hit subscribe to see how this ethical dilemma resolves. The next morning, the boardroom was eerily silent. Every member was present, along with Mira from HR and the company's general counsel. Victor sat at the far end, looking smug. Thank you all for coming, Elliot began. We're here to address allegations against Bryn Harlow and determine appropriate action. Victor straightened his shirt. I believe the evidence I've provided speaks for itself. Does it? I asked quietly, connecting my laptop to the projection system. Victor's smile didn't waver. He thought he knew what I had. He was wrong. I didn't play the hotel bar video. Instead, I displayed unaltered project documents showing the original accessibility violations alongside Victor's emails instructing me to approve them. These are the actual violations I refuse to approve, I explained, not for personal gain, but because they broke the law. One by one, I dismantled Victor's allegations using only official company records and unedited communications. No secret recordings, no anonymous videos, just the plain documented truth. Victor's composure began to crack. These are taken out of context. I was simply trying to meet client needs while— What? I interrupted. While violating federal law, while excluding people with disabilities from public spaces. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. I continued, methodically presenting evidence, project by project, violation by violation. Miss Harlow, the general counsel interjected, this is certainly concerning, but Mr. Reeves has provided recordings suggesting you've been less than ethical yourself. Those recordings were selectively edited, I replied. I have the originals. I played the complete conversations, showing how Victor had cut and spliced my statements to make it seem I was threatening clients, when in fact I was explaining legal liabilities they might face for non-compliance. Victor's face flushed deep red. This proves nothing. She's manipulated these files. Digital timestamps and metadata would prove otherwise, I said calmly. Your IT department can verify them. As Victor's defense crumbled, I noticed him glancing nervously at his buzzing phone. Elliot cleared his throat. Victor, would you care to respond? Victor loosened his collar. This is a witch hunt. Bryn has had it out for me since day one because I challenged her rigid interpretations. Rigid interpretations of what? Civil rights laws? I asked. You're being dramatic. Am I? I turned to the room. Yesterday, I visited Pinewood Medical Center, one of our recent projects. I asked to use the accessible bathroom Victor insisted was close enough to compliance. I displayed photos on my phone. The turning radius is 4 inches too small. That means someone in a wheelchair can enter the bathroom but can't turn around to leave. They become trapped. The room fell silent. This isn't about bureaucratic red tape, I continued. It's about human dignity, about whether everyone deserves equal access to the spaces we create. Victor's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, color draining from his face. If you'll excuse me, he muttered, standing abruptly. We're not finished here, Elliot said sharply. Sit down, Victor. The authority in Elliot's voice made him sink back into his chair, phone still vibrating. Something wrong? I asked innocently. Victor glared at me. What did you do? I presented the truth, that's all. His phone buzzed again. Unable to resist, he glanced at the screen, then looked up in dawning horror. You said you wouldn't release it. I blinked, genuinely confused. Release what? Before he could respond, the boardroom door opened. Patrick Wallace, Victor's high-powered attorney, walked in, followed by a young woman in a wheelchair. The room fell silent. She couldn't have been more than 16, with intelligent eyes and an unmistakable resemblance to Patrick. Sorry to interrupt, Patrick said coldly. I'm Patrick Wallace. This is my daughter, Lily. Victor looked like he might be sick. Mr. Greaves? Patrick continued, addressing Elliot. I believe you received my email regarding Mr. Reeves' conduct. Elliot nodded slowly. Yes, then you understand why we're here. Victor stood, panic evident. Patrick, whatever you think I've done, save it. Patrick cut him off. My daughter wanted to see the man who believes people like her don't deserve equal access to public spaces. Lily wheeled forward, stopping directly across from Victor. You said it's not worth spending millions to accommodate 10% of people, she said, voice steady, gaze unflinching. I'm part of that 10%. The blood drained from Victor's face. That conversation was private. How did you— My dad's assistant recorded you at the bar last night, she explained. She recognized you from her brother's workplace. He uses a wheelchair, too. I suddenly understood. The mysterious ally, the person who had sent me Victor's recordings, had been Patrick's assistant all along. Victor, Elliot said, voice unnaturally calm, would you care to explain what Miss Wallace is referring to? Victor's eyes darted around, seeking escape. I may have had too much to drink, said things I didn't mean. Like admitting you falsified compliance documents? Patrick asked. Or bragging about receiving kickbacks for helping clients circumvent accessibility laws? The general counsel leaned forward. Kickbacks? Victor's defense collapsed entirely. This is absurd. You can't possibly— I've already filed complaints with the State Licensing Board and the Department of Justice, Patrick interrupted. The video evidence is compelling. What followed was the professional equivalent of a public execution. As Victor stammered through desperate denials, Patrick methodically outlined the legal consequences of his actions, both personally and for the firm. He concluded, Miss Harlow's detailed documentation shows she consistently pushed for compliance despite pressure, which will significantly mitigate the firm's liability. All eyes turned to me. I had remained silent, watching Victor's world collapse. Did you plan this? He hissed. I met his gaze. No, I didn't know about the video until last night, and unlike you, I chose not to use it. His eyes widened slightly. But you could have. Yes. Why didn't I? The question hung in the air. I had wrestled with that decision all night. The video would have destroyed him instantly, but using it felt wrong, too much like becoming what I despised about him. Because this was never about destroying you, Victor. It was about protecting people from your decisions. The meeting concluded with Victor placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. As people filed out of the boardroom, Lily wheeled over to me. Thank you, she said simply. For what? I didn't know about the video. She smiled. Not for that. For caring enough to fight. Most people don't. As she turned to leave, I realized something. How did you know I didn't use the video? That I chose not to release it? Kamla told me, my dad's assistant, she explained. She said you texted back last night that you wouldn't need it, that you'd find another way. You know what's strange? I said. For weeks I fantasized about taking Victor down, but when I had the chance to destroy him completely, it didn't feel right. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, Lily replied. It's change. Those words stayed with me long after the meeting ended. 3 weeks later, the firm announced significant changes. Victor had resigned to pursue other opportunities, a corporate euphemism that fooled no one. The Department of Justice had opened an investigation into his conduct. 5 projects underwent emergency retrofitting to address accessibility violations. My new role as Director of Accessibility and Compliance was made permanent, with expanded authority and resources. More importantly, the firm established a community advisory board that included people with various disabilities to review major projects. The most meaningful change came 6 months later, when we unveiled the renovated Pinewood Medical Center. Every bathroom now exceeded accessibility requirements. Every pathway included proper tactile strips. Every entrance featured automatic doors of the correct dimensions. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I watched an elderly man in a wheelchair navigate the space with ease, his face showing none of the frustration and humiliation that so many experience in poorly designed buildings. Elliot stood beside me. You know, he said, when this all started, I thought you were rigid, uncompromising. And he gestured toward the elderly man, who now demonstrated to his grandchildren how easily he could maneuver in the spacious bathroom. Now I understand what was really at stake. That evening, I visited my grandmother's grave, bringing fresh flowers and news of my work. As I sat beside her headstone, I thought about Victor, who had underestimated me, underestimated the law, and most fatally, underestimated the power of designing spaces for everyone. My revenge wasn't in his professional destruction, though that had certainly happened. It wasn't even in taking his position or undoing his harmful work. My true revenge was in creating spaces where people like my grandmother, like Lily, like the elderly man at Pinewood, could move through the world with dignity. Where a mother wouldn't have to explain to her son why he couldn't use a public bathroom. Where architecture embraced humanity in all its diverse forms. Victor had seen accessibility as an expensive inconvenience. I had shown it was an essential right. And in doing so, I changed not just one man's career, but an entire firm's approach to the spaces they created. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't in destroying your enemy, but in building something they never believed possible, something that remains long after the battle is forgotten. I placed my hand on my grandmother's headstone. "We did it, Gran," I whispered. "The world's a little more accessible today." And that was a victory worth fighting for. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Have you ever witnessed or experienced accessibility issues that could have been easily addressed with proper design? Share your experiences in the comments. Your stories matter and deserve to be heard. Together, we can create a world where everyone has equal access to the spaces we all share.